ओके सो वापस से स्वागत है आप लोग का हमारे इस प्लेटफॉर्म पे। डिस्कस करेंगे हम लोग अब इस सेशन में अपने न्यूज़ सेक्शन पे ज़्यादा ध्यान देंगे और डिस्कशन पॉइंट्स पे। डिस्कस करने से पहले एक बार जानना चाहेंगे आप लोग को आवाज़ क्लियर हो रही है और स्क्रीन विजिबल है? अगर हाँ तो काइंडली प्रेस 40 इन द चैट बॉक्स ताकि हम लोग अपना ये सेशन अभी से स्टार्ट करते हुए दिखें। काइंडली प्रेस 40 अगर आप लोग को मेरी आवाज़ क्लियर हो रही है और स्क्रीन प्रॉपर्ली विजिबल है ताकि हम लोग सेशन आज का यहाँ से स्टार्ट कर सके। ओके सो गोल्ड का मूव देख सकते हैं 1760 के लेवल्स को ब्रेक करते हुए अपना जो हाई बनाते हुए दिख रहा है अभी डे हाई 1762.20 तक का हाई बनाते हुए दिखा है। ये जो हम लोग को जेरोम पवेल की स्पीच देखने को मिली है उसके कारण ही हम लोग को इतने इम्पैक्ट देखने को मिल रहे हैं गोल्ड के प्राइजेस में। अदरवाइज इतने इम्पैक्शन नहीं देखने को मिलते किसी न्यूज़ के थ्रू और न्यूज़ भी उतनी ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं थी जिसकी वजह से इतना चेंज देखने को मिले। बट जो चेंजेस आते हुए दिख रहे हैं हमें वो जस्ट स्पीच की वजह से आते हुए दिख रहे हैं। और अभी भी गोल्ड हमारा एक बार तेजी के साथ मूव करते हुए देखने को मिला है 1761 1762 की रेंज में। ओके सो अभी हम लोग कोई ट्रेड नहीं लेने वाले क्योंकि हम लोगों ने ऑलरेडी अपनी ट्रेड्स ले ली हैं एंड अब हम लोग डिस्कस करने जा रहे हैं अपने न्यूज़ सेक्शन पे। तो हम लोग आ जाते हैं अपने न्यूज़ पॉइंट्स पे और सबसे पहले हम लोग डिस्कस करते हैं गोल्ड न्यूज़ netdenia.com। सो गोल्ड के प्राइजेस वापस से एक बार अपसाइड ब्रेक करते हुए 1761.11 1760.90 के लेवल्स पे और आज की ओपनिंग से 31 पॉइंट्स की तेजी के साथ 1.85% की तेजी के साथ देखने को मिल रहे हैं। रेंज देखे तो 1721 से 1762.49 के लेवल्स पे प्राइजेस मूव करते हुए फिलहाल। प्रीवियस क्लोजिंग की बात करें तो प्रीवियस क्लोजिंग हम लोग को 1728.81 पे देखने को मिली। आज की ओपनिंग 1728.73 के लेवल्स पे हुई है। इसके साथ ही ईयर वाइज चेंजेस की बात करें तो 133 पॉइंट्स की गिरावट के साथ बस देखने को मिल रहा है एंड साथ ही देख सकते हैं 7.0304% की गिरावट के साथ 52 वीक्स है 1965.55 52 वीक्स लो 1676.10। वॉल्यूम अभी करेंटली अवेलेबल नहीं है कि कितना ट्रेड करते हुए दिख रहा है बट वॉल्यूम काफ़ी हाई है क्योंकि स्पीच के दौरान वॉल्यूम काफ़ी हाई होते हैं और मूवमेंट भी काफ़ी ज़्यादा देखने को मिलते हैं। आ जाते हैं अपने ग्लोबल मार्केट का मूव देखने एक बार। सो ग्लोबल मार्केट का मूव देखेंगे हम लोग। देख सकते हैं आज हमारा डो जोन्स नेगेटिव होते हुए दिख रहा है S&P 500 नेगेटिव। बिटकॉइन आज हमारा पॉजिटिव है 3.86% की तेजी के साथ। इसके साथ ही यूरो स्टॉक्स 50 नेगेटिव डेक्स 30 नेगेटिव निकाई 225 नेगेटिव। माइसेक्स इंडेक्स पॉजिटिव होते हुए हैंगसेंग पॉजिटिव निफ्टी 50 आज नेगेटिव होते हुए एसएक्स 200 पॉजिटिव। ब्रेंट क्रूड ऑयल नेगेटिव। डॉलर इंडेक्स हमारा नेगेटिव होते हुए गोल्ड स्पॉट पॉजिटिव होते हुए 1.86% की तेजी के साथ। सिल्वर स्पॉट भी पॉजिटिव। एक बार हम लोग आ जाते हैं अपने MT4 टर्मिनल पे तो वापस से तेजी दिखाते हुए। $1760.55 के लेवल्स पे प्राइजेस मूव करते हुए। एक दूसरी कैंडल फॉर्मेशन होती है हम लोग की 15 मिनट कैंडल 1761 से लगातार हम लोग को तेजी आती हुई दिखी है 1739 के लेवल से। $1761.8898 1762 तक के लेवल्स प्राइजेस पूरी तरीके से तेजी के साथ देखने को मिल रहे हैं। 1762.36। सो वापस आ जाते हैं अपने न्यूज पॉइंट पे और हम लोग डिस्कस कर रहे हैं गोल्ड न्यूज एफएक्स स्ट्रीट। So XAU USD keeps downside opens towards 1717. So there seems to be no respite for gold price as the risk remained skewed to the downside amid the immense strength seen in the US dollar and treasury yield so far this week. देख सकते हैं प्राइजेस पूरी तरीके से अपसाइड राइज करते हुए लगातार 1762 के लेवल्स पे फिलहाल मूव करते हुए। सो गोल्ड हैज रन इनटू ऑफर्स एट higher levels now turning south to the Fibonacci 23.6% one day at 1727. Sellers will then target the intersection of previous day's low and Fibonacci 23.6% 1 month at 1722. Further down the pivot point, one day support 1 at 1770 could come to the buyer's rescue. Gold price could see a free fall towards the pivot point 1 week. Support 2 at 1710 should the aforesaid cushion give way. On the upside, immediate resistance awaited around 1731, which is the confluence of the Fibonacci 38.2% one day, pivot point 1 week, support 1 and simple moving average 10 hour. Next, the bulls could aim for the previous high 4 hour at 1735, above which the convergence of Fibonacci 61.8% one day and previous week's low at 1738 will come into play. Powerful hurdle around 1740 to 1742. Will test the bearish commitment if the recovery gains momentum. That area is the confluence of the Fibonacci 38.2% 1 month, pivot point 1 day R1 and SMA 5 1 day. फंडामेंटल्स ओवरव्यू की बात करते हैं लेकिन एक बार हम लोग MT4 टर्मिनल पे चलेंगे तो देख सकते हैं वापस से तेजी 1763.64 68 के लेवल्स पे ये तेजी हम लोग को क्यों देखने को मिल रही है तो हम लोग एक बार थोड़ी देर अपने पहल के स्पीच को कंटिन्यू करेंगे क्योंकि अभी तक हम लोग को तेजी देखने को मिली इतनी तेजी अभी तक कभी नहीं देखने को मिली।
We're going to have a higher tax rate than a country that has been taking our jobs and is communist ideology. Can you explain why raising our corporate tax rate above China's is a good idea, if you think it is? And do you think this would hurt our competitiveness with China and around the world?
Our companies are the most competitive and profitable in the world. The effective tax rate that they pay is very low, and recent studies suggest that among advanced countries, the United States has an effective tax rate that is among the lowest of countries around the world. We can certainly afford to take the corporate tax rate up to 26.5% as in House Ways and Means without negatively impacting firms' performance. And we propose to do that in the context of an international agreement that received the support of over 130 countries worldwide to establish global minimum tax rates that will apply to other countries' firms. Right now, the United States is the only country with a global minimum tax rate on its multinational corporations. We propose to raise that, but at the same time, other countries will raise theirs much more. And that means that the competitiveness of American firms will be enhanced, and we will be reducing the incentives that exist in our tax law right now to export jobs and profits.
Thank you. I don't know how much time I have left, but thank you, Secretary Yellen. Well, one thing we've learned over the last several years is we need to take the threat from China more seriously here in America, making America less competitive. And despite what you said, raising our corporate tax rate makes us less competitive. And our economic adversaries like China, it's too high of a cost for all this spending. Running up these massive debts that our children will have to pay back for this spending is just not right. So despite what we're hearing and what many are saying, this reconciliation package will be expensive in terms of dollars and frankly to the future of our competitiveness in this country, racking up this debt. And I just fear we're going to pay for this for years to come. So thank you, Madam Chairman. Back to balance.
Thank you very much. The gentlewoman from Ohio, Mrs. Beatty, who is also the chair of the Subcommittee on Diversity and Inclusion, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today. Certainly, as I've been listening, a lot of descriptive words were used, everything from dysfunctional to meaningless to irrational. Well, I could think of a lot of other words that I could use, but certainly those words are appropriate to describe what Democrats inherited from the last administration, whether that's the irresponsibleness of the past administration, whether it's all the debt that was occurred because of the Trump administration. I think those words are appropriate, just Madam Chair, by my colleagues, were very misdirected, in my opinion. You should look at your own house and home before throwing stones, and especially when they're not appropriate. Now, with that said, to our two witnesses who've been very responsive, I say thank you. And let me get in quickly to my first question on the Federal Reserve. Certainly, you know, Mr. Chair, we've had a lot of conversations about diversity. I want to thank you for responding and continuing to increase your diversity. But as you know, recently there's been two Federal Reserve presidents who have left, quit, retired, bottom line, immediately leaving or gone from the Bank of Dallas and Boston. So my question is, you know where I'm going with this. I would certainly be hopeful that we could increase our numbers in diversity beyond Raphael Bostic by asking that we use the Beatty rule, pattern after the Rooney rule, to do as we did with the Atlanta Federal Reserve president and make sure in that interview process we have a African American or female. Do you have any comments on that?
I do. Thank you, Ms. Beatty. I can absolutely guarantee you that we will work hard in both of those processes to find and give a fair shot to diverse candidates for those two jobs, as we do. And it'll be a big focus of both of those processes.
Thank you. Secretary Yellen, you will recall back in 2016, Secretary Lew made his historic announcement that Harriet Tubman would be the face on a $20 bill. I sent you a letter in July, early July, along with my colleague, Congressman Katko, requesting the committee to move forward with the Obama administration's plan to put her on the face of the 20. I understand your staffs have been in discussion on this issue, and am hoping to get a high-level overview and to ask you if there's any comment you can make on this.
Well, thank you for that question, Representative Beatty. We believe it is very important that our notes reflect the history and diversity of our country, and I couldn't possibly think of a better way to honor Harriet Tubman's legacy and her courage in fighting for the freedom of enslaved people and women's right to vote than seeing her on the $20 bill. Issuing notes, as you know, is a very lengthy process. It involves collaboration among a number of different agencies, and it's necessary to design new security and counterfeit features. And
Right.
unfortunately, that means the lead time to redesign new bills and ensure their security is long. When Secretary Lew announced
Madam Secretary, Madam Secretary, I'm gonna go to my rental question because the clock is down, and we will follow up with your staff. Just prior to the new administration coming into office, the former administration rushed the regulations and questions for the rental assistance program. Those regulations were so unworkable that states like my state, Ohio, and others were telling me that they weren't even sure if they would be able to distribute rental assistance funds under those guidelines. Isn't it true that, Secretary Yellen, isn't it true that the secretary under the new administration had to spend weeks going back and redoing all of that to make sure that the funds could actually be distributed?
That's correct.
Thank you. I want that to go on the record. Some of my colleagues wanted to drill down and make our secretary you answering those questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davidson, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I thank our witnesses and our colleagues. I appreciate this hearing. Chairman Powell, you have extensive private sector experience, and of course, as chairman of the Federal Reserve, you have a role in bank regulation. In your experience, do banks or lenders increase lines of credit unconditionally? Isn't there some level of underwriting involved? Wouldn't banks have problems with their regulators if they did no underwriting for a line of credit?
Yes, no, of course, they're very careful in the lending they do.
Well, I submit that it's perfectly rational for Congress to expect something in exchange for an increased line of credit. The plan presented is atrocious. It will never balance. It doesn't even propose to balance in 15, 20, 30, 100 years. There's no plan to quit bankrupting America, Madam Secretary. Now, thankfully, under the Federal Reserve's leadership and 13.3 authority, we had some facilities in place to prevent real financial calamity. So recently, the Subcommittee on National Security, International Development, and Monetary Policy held a hearing to discuss the Federal Reserve's lending facilities under Section 13.3 and how those facilities were utilized prior to and since the passage of the CARES Act. Some of my colleagues, I fear, don't understand even how some of the products like bonds or margin calls work, as they've criticized programs where there is literally no buy side in the market. And of course, the Federal Reserve stepped in to create a buy side and support the markets. I've heard colleagues say, well, there were only 2 loans under the municipal liquidity facility, for example, while there were hundreds of loans, hundreds of billions of dollars of credit extended. How important are the 13.3 provisions, to the financial stability of our country?
They're very important, but they're reserved for real economic emergencies, financial emergencies. And as you point out, they functioned, I think, very well in the crisis as backstops. That we put them in place, and the private capital markets started working. And really, that's success. That's what success looks like.
Do you think 13.3 should ever be used for a political goal or something to fulfill a dual mandate rather than an emergency?
Actually, no, I don't. I think the current institutional arrangements are very good. I think we need the approval of the Treasury Secretary. Realistically, we work with Treasury, and we're constrained for very specific circumstances, unusual and exigent circumstances. There are a number of tests in the law, and I think it's an arrangement that works.
Thank you, Chairman. Recently, Federal Reserve Governor Michelle
देख
Bowman
सकते हैं
gave a speech in which she discussed the
9 बजे का टाइम और हमारी स्पीक अभी तक चलती हुई और गोल्ड हमारा पूरी तरीके से अपसाइड स्पाइक करते हुए दूसरी एक ग्रीन कैंडल बनाते हुए वापस से 1762.20 तक के लेवल्स बनाते हुए देखने को मिल रहा है। पूरी तरीके से अपसाइड रिबाउंड करते हुए आज गोल्ड के प्राइसेस हम लोग को रेस करते हुए देखने को मिल रहा है। 1762.525663 के लेवल्स पे मूव करते हुए। आ जाते हैं अपने डिस्कशन पॉइंट पे। तो हम लोग देख रहे थे एफएक्स स्ट्रीट में फंडामेंटल ओवरव्यू के बारे में। सो देयर सीम्स टू बी नो रिस्पाइट फॉर गोल्ड प्राइस एज द रिस्क रिमेन्स skewed to the downside amid the immense strength seen in the US dollar and the treasury yield so far this week. The Fed remains well on the track to withdraw the stimulus report later this year. With market pricing a rate hike in 2022, the hawkish Fed narrative and higher inflation seeming temporary keep the bullish trend undertone intact in the US yields. Weighing negatively on the yield gold, further facing worries over the US government shutdown also adds to the greenback strength at gold price. Looking ahead, the dynamics in the yields and quarter end flows will have a significant bearing on gold price. 1 week की average forecasting 1728.50, for 1 month 1708 and for 1 quarter 1714 के आसपास। सो एक बार हम लोग आ जाते हैं इस न्यूज़ पे। सो देख सकते हैं we are close to hitting the debt ceiling, gold doesn't care. Another fiscal year, another governmental fight to raise the debt limit. A failure spells a crisis, but gold turns a blind eye and continues its fall. So America has a now tradition. The government shutdown is coming. A new fiscal year start tomorrow, and if Congress fail to agree on a budget by the end of the today, the government will shut down. Why does it mean the US economy? So according to the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, the failure to lift the debt ceiling could be a catastrophe. If the debt ceiling is not raised, there would be a financial crisis, a calamity. It would be undermine confidence in the dollar as a reserve currency. It would be a wound of enormous proportions. It is imperative that Congress swiftly address the debt limit. If it doesn't, America would default the first time in history. The full path and credit of the United States would be impaired, and our country would likely face a financial crisis and economic recession. She also clarifies in a separate letter sent to Congress that Treasury could run out of money by October 18, 2021. We now estimate that Treasury is likely to exhaust its extraordinary measures if Congress has not acted to raise or suspend the debt limit by October 18. At the point, we expect Treasury would be left with very limited resources that would be depleted quickly. It is uncertain whether we could continue to meet all the nation's commitment after that date. The rhetoric was rather gloomy. As a result, the risk aversion softened while stock prices dropped. So gold prices had to increase, right? Well, not exactly, as the chart below shows. The price of yellow metal continues its downtrend. That accelerated in September, partially caused by more hawkish expectation for the tapering timeline and future path of the federal funds rate. So what is happening in the gold market? I would point out three crucial factors right now. First, the US dollar has appreciated recently. Yes, despite worries about the debt ceiling, the greenback has strengthened. It shows that there is simply no alternative. Another issue is that people have seen that movie before and they knew how it ends. At some point, Congress will pass a new debt limit and return to its spending spree. Second, the bond yield has increased. For example, the nominal yields on 10-year treasuries jumped from about 1.3% last week to almost 1.5% on Monday, that is September 27, 2021. As the chart below shows, the recent dot plot revealed that FOMC member want to raise the federal fund rate earlier than previously thought, which has been transmitted into the yield curve, creating downside pressure on gold. Highest interest rates imply higher opportunity cost of bullion gold. Third, the market sentiment still seems to be negative towards gold. It's partially justified by the macroeconomic environment, namely the rapid recovery from the pandemic recession. As the global economy is improving, the central banks are about to tighten their monetary policy. Implications for gold. So, what does it imply for the gold market? Well, the environment of strengthening dollar and rising gold is negative for the gold metal. Higher interest rate make bonds more attractive relative to gold. The worries about the debt ceiling will likely to short lived and won't provide gold with the needed lifeline. The current downward trend in gold shows that the market simply doesn't care about the government shutdown. The only hope is an inflationary crisis, but so far worries about the inflation have been entailing highest interest rate rather than a strong demand for gold as an inflation hedge. वन फ्री फॉलो अप टू दी अबव वी कैन सी उसके पहले आ जाते हैं एक बार MT4 टर्मिनल पे तो 62 के लेवल से अब थोड़ी सी करेक्शन दिखाते हुए 1759.68 के लेवल्स पे देखने को मिल रहा है हमें गोल्ड का प्राइस. सेवनटीन 59.9082 के लेवल्स पे प्राइजेस मूव करते हुए देख सकते हैं प्राइजेस 1759.8582 के लेवल्स पे. सेवनटीन 60.2318 के लेवल्स पे प्राइजेस मूव करते हुए पूरी तरीके से स्टेबल होते हुए 1760 के लेवल्स पे. आ जाते हैं डिस्कशन पॉइंट पे तो हम लोग डिस्कस कर रहे हैं गोल्ड न्यूज reuters.com. So precious gold rises but still on shaky ground as the Fed taper looms. So bullion set for quarterly drop. US dollar are near one year high. Gold stabilized on Thursday after 2 days of losses, helped by a slight pullback in dollar, but gains were kept in check by expectations that the US Federal Reserve would start tapering in the monetary policy support. So spot gold rose 0.2% to $1729.26 per ounce by 0920 GMT. US gold futures were up 0.5% at $1730.70. Gold is being offered some reprieve from the dollar taking a breather. But heightened prospects for the Fed tapering now widely expected to commence in November, and chances of Treasury yield continuing to gain are expected to heap more downward pressure on the zero yielding precious metal. The dollar index paused on Thursday But expectations that the Fed will start winding down its stimulus this year kept the US currency near its highest in a year, diminishing gold's appeal for holders of the other currencies as putting it on course for a 2.2% quarterly dip. Benchmark US 10-year Treasury bond yield too held above 1.5%, a level not seen late June. While factors including the US debt ceiling impasse, rising global inflation, and the evergreen crisis should normally support gold, bullion remains under pressure from a strong dollar and alternate safe haven and rising yield. Silver rose 0.5% to $21.62 per ounce. Platinum gained 0.4% to $954.31, while palladium climbed 1.8% to $1891.02. आज आते एक बार MT4 टर्मिनल पे देख सकते हैं 1761 के लेवल्स. 1761.75. सेवनटीन 61.8381 के लेवल्स. प्राइजेस पूरी तरीके से अपसाइड राइज करते हुए वापस से एक बार अपसाइड, लेकिन अब जिस तरीके से मूवमेंट बनाते हुए दिख रहा है करेक्शन का माहौल बनते हुए दिखेगा. सेवनटीन 61.181722 के लेवल्स. वापस से 1760 के लेवल्स. जिस तरीके से प्राइजेस मूव करते हुए दिख रहे हैं अब लग रहा है कि हो सकता है एक बार करेक्शन दिखाते हुए मिले. इससे ज़्यादा तेजी की उम्मीद अब हम लोग नहीं कर रहे हैं. लेकिन अभी भी स्पीक जारी है तो कुछ कह नहीं सकते. पॉसिबल है एक बार वापस से अपसाइड देखने को मिले मोमेंट. दो मिनट बाद दूसरी कैंडल के फॉर्मेशन का टाइम देखेंगे. उस कैंडल का मोमेंट किस डायरेक्शन में है. $1760.1920. 2 मिनट बाद दूसरी कैंडल फॉर्मेशन. 1759.82 1 मिनट बाद दूसरी कैंडल फॉर्मेशन का टाइम। देख सकते हैं एक दूसरी कैंडल फॉर्मेशन 1759.5557 के लेवल्स पे प्राइसेस मूव करते हुए। सेवनटीन 59.33 अब हो सकता है थोड़े से प्राइसेस में करेक्शन आते हुए दिख सकते हैं, लेकिन इतना भरोसा नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि अभी भी स्पीच जारी है और मार्केट में वैसा ही मूव देखने को मिल सकता है जैसी स्पीचेस मूव करती हुई दिखेंगी। देख सकते हैं वापस से एक थोड़ी सी बुल ग्रीन कैंडल 1759.76 के लेवल्स पे। सो हम लोग आ जाते हैं वापस से अपने डिस्कशन पॉइंट पे और हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे आज कुछ चीजें। सो हम आते हैं अपने डिस्कशन सेशन पे। So XAU USD forecast and gold analysis points to be discussed today. Gold continue to move. Signal in the favor of rising XAU USD. Gold price rebound suspectable. Rising US Treasury yield. Price of gold may consolidate. Gold price daily chart. GLD ETF outflow. Dim XAU USD outlook. Gold technical forecast. So gold continue to move as part of the correction and the formation of an inverted head and shoulder pattern reverse. At the time of publication of the forecast, the price of gold is $1752 per troy ounce. Moving averages indicated a short-term bearish trend. Price broke through the areas between the signal lines downward, which indicate the pressure from the seller of the asset and a potential continuation of fall from the current levels. At the moment, we should expect an attempt to develop a decline in the test the support level near the 1740 area, where can we expect a rebound and a continued rise in the price of gold with the potential target above the level of 1885. So an additional signal in the favor of raising the XAU USD quotes would be test of the support area on the relative strength index. The second signal will be a rebound from the lower border of head and shoulder reversal pattern. Cancellation of the option to raise gold prices on September 29, 2021 will be a fall and a breakdown of level of 1685. The rise in XAU-USD quotes, this will indicate a breakdown of support area and continue fall to the area below level of 1650. Expect an acceleration of the rise in XAU-USD quotes with the breakdown of the resistance area and closing of the price above the level of 1835. In this case, we consider the completion of the formation of model and the continuation of the development of rise in the price of gold. XAU-USD forecast and gold analysis. So, XAU-USD forecast and gold analysis September 29, 2021 implies an attempt to test the support area near the level of 1740. Further, the growth of quotations with the target of the level of 1885 will continue. This will indicate a breakout of the support area and cancellation of the pattern. In this case, we should expect the gold price to continue declines with a potential target below the level of 1615. And if it's reached at the level of 1650, 1580 will be the next level for the market. Gold price taking points. So price of the gold seems to craving a bullish inside day candle as its attempt to retrace the decline from the start of the week. But current market conditions may continue to drag on the precious metal as speculations for a looming shift in the Federal Reserve policy lifts US Treasury yields. Gold price rebound susceptible to rising versus US Treasury yields. So that the price of gold bounces back from a fresh monthly low of 1728 as the 10-year Treasury yield pulled back from a fresh monthly high of 1.56%, and bullion may consolidate over the remainder of the week as an inside day candle takes shape going into the end of September. इकोनॉमिक कैलेंडर एक बार देख लेंगे तो जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट क्वार्टर टू क्वार्टर फाइनल देखने को मिला क्वार्टर टू का प्रीवियस 6.3% और करेंट 6.6%, दैट इज एक्चुअल ग्रेटर देन फोरकास्ट देखने को मिला और ग्रेटर देन प्रीवियस। 1 अक्टूबर हम लोग को जो डेटा देखने को मिलने वाले हैं फ्राइडे मार्केट कोर सीपीसी इंडेक्स प्राइस इंडेक्स ईयर टू ईयर और इसके साथ ही प्राइस पीसी प्राइस इंडेक्स ईयर टू ईयर, मार्केट मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पीएमआई फाइनल और इसके साथ आईएसएम मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पीएमआई, मिचिगन कंज्यूमर सेंटिमेंट फाइनल। ये सारे डेटाज हम लोग को कल के लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट। सो प्राइस ऑफ गोल्ड may consolidate. Price of gold may consolidate over the remainder of the week as it holds within the previous day's range. But the rebound from the August low, that is 1682, may turn out to be a correction in the broader trend rather than a change in the market behavior as longer date treasury yields retrace the decline from earlier this year. गोल्ड प्राइस डेली चार्ट देख सकते हैं तो लेवल हम लोग को 1681 तक का एक बहुत अच्छा सपोर्ट देखने को मिल रहा है। जीएलडी ETF outflows dim XAU outlook. So gold prices remain under pressure as treasury sell-off continues. ETF holding hit fresh multi-month lows at retail ditches GLD. XAU USD prices break below technical level on weakness. Gold price continued to struggle as traders priced in a higher rate environment in 2022 as central banks around the globe moved to tighten monetary policy. The Federal Reserve's September rate decision caused a sell-off in treasuries after the policy statement hinted that tapering balance sheet growth is nearing. While tapering asset purchases doesn't guarantee subsequent rate hikes, that is largely seen to be the case in the scenario evidenced by the reaction in the treasury yields. Stronger US dollar makes gold more expensive. So meanwhile the broader market is seeing a wave of risk aversion, the US dollar has benefited from that move, especially given the bearish backdrop in treasuries. A stronger US dollar makes gold more expensive for foreign buyers. Inflation is set to run over target. So persistence price pressures are also pushing yields higher, with the surging energy prices adding to the argument against the Fed's transitory inflation narrative. St. Louis Federal Reserve President James Bullard reinforced the central bank's hawkish outlook. And said inflation is set to run over target through 2024. Gold tracking ETF. So gold is also showing weakness through ETF funds flows. Exchange traded funds are a type of security that allows many retail traders to gain exposure to gold. Total holding for gold tracking ETFs fell to the lowest level since May this past week. Outflows from ETFs are generally considered to show a bearish outlook for the underlying asset. गोल्ड टेक्निकल फोरकास्ट की बात करते हैं तो गोल्ड प्राइसेस broke through the 38.2% Fibonacci retracement from the July-August move after the Fibonacci level offered support over the past several days. That downside breaks open the (23.6% Fibonacci at 1770.87, which was last tested in early August. RSI moderated above the oversold 30 level while MACD remains oriented lower. सो वापस से मूव करते हैं अपने MT4 टर्मिनल की तरफ और देखते हैं गोल्ड का मूव. सो देख सकते हैं वापस से करेक्शन 1757 तक के लेवल्स. (1757.6867 के लेवल 60 के लेवल से वापस आती हुई दिखी है मार्केट. वन डे कैंडल की बात करें तो अपना हाई जो बनाती हुई दिखी है 1764 के आसपास अपना हाई बनाते हुए वापस से 1757 तक के लेवल्स. 15 मिनट कैंडल पूरी तरीके से डाउन. (1757.5357 देख सकते हैं अभी तक अगर स्पीच चल रही है तो उसका मूवमेंट किस डायरेक्शन में है और स्पीच में हम लोग को क्या देखने को मिल रहा है. थोड़ी देर हम लोग वापस से स्पीच डिस्कस करेंगे क्योंकि बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट स्पीच है जैसे कि हम लोग कह रहे हैं.
We've worked right from the outset with our offices of Inspector General and others to make sure that we have appropriate reporting and fraud control in place to minimize fraud in the programs and make sure that we have controls in place.
Okay. Chairman Powell, any thoughts on that, or would you rather take a pass?
I'll follow up and also see if we have anything on that for you. Of course, the PPP was administered by the SBA. We did the liquidity facility.
Okay.
I'd be happy to, in that part of it, be happy to check and come back to you.
That would be great. And Madam Secretary, would you again talk about what happens upon default and what that means for the American people?
It's a catastrophe. We're likely to end up with a financial crisis, surely a recession, and millions of individuals who are counting on checks from the government not receiving those in a timely fashion, and long-lasting consequences of higher interest rates for everybody who borrows.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Chairman Powell, Secretary Yellen, thank you for being with us here today. Out of the gates, Secretary Yellen, I'd just like to note that the proposal for bank account reporting that you do not believe to be an invasion of privacy, I'd just like to be on the record that I believe that this would be an invasion of privacy, and I remain concerned with it. I'd like to jump over to debt to GDP. In a previous question, you noted that crossing the threshold of 100% of debt to GDP in the United States, now roughly 105%, was not fiscally irresponsible. Is that correct? In a comment to Mr. Torres, he was examining
I believe we're in a place where we can certainly bear the burden of the debt now and in the future.
And you believe that because we're currently in a low inflationary environment with low interest rates. Is that accurate?
That's right, but
Would you-
I'm assuming that interest rates, as the economy recovers, will move up to a more normal level in line with the forecasts of many professional forecasters.
And if in the event that the inflationary rate increased beyond that current forecast by the experts that you're speaking with, that would increase the burden on the debt, would that then become fiscally irresponsible to have a debt to GDP ratio over 100%?
Well, it depends what happens to real interest rates in the economy. If they were to rise significantly, that, of course, poses a risk that we need to take into account.
I think we should absolutely take it into account. I'm very concerned with the spending proposals from the Biden administration and the impact that would have in the event that we enter a more inflationary period where interest rates increase.
I want to make clear that the proposals from the Biden administration are neutral with respect to the debt path, that the projections that we have shown display essentially a level debt path over the next 10 years, and beyond 15 years, substantially reduce the outstanding debt to GDP ratio.
I remain very concerned about the debt path that the Biden administration is taking us on, and a whole array of spending proposals that we're seeing. Let me shift gears slightly over to you, Mr. Chairman Powell, if I can, and build on this topic as it relates to inflation. It's something I've spoken with you many times about, in particular in this committee in July, December of last year. And in those times, you've suggested, and I think you've continued to state, the Fed's not ready to take action to head off inflation. Yet we're continuing to see prices to increase. We saw consumer prices increase 5.4% year over year more recently, and continuing, and regardless of what the White House press team says, I think people are really seeing the impact of higher prices day in and day out. Now, I know that you've said many of these you believe to be transitory, that you think they'll come down. But here's my concern, is that individual and the public expectations are beginning to change as people truly see the price increases when they go to fill up their car with gas, when they go to a grocery store, when they go back to school shopping. In a recent poll, we saw 87% of Americans said they're concerned about inflation. A New York Fed report reported that consumers expect to see higher inflations over the medium term. And so could you provide a little color as to what you think how the Fed's going to respond to consumers expecting to see inflation?
Well, essentially what would need to happen for inflation to remain high year upon year upon year is we'd have to have a new inflation regime in which people began to enter their psychology, and they began to think that it was coming and expect that it was coming.
But don't we do, with all due respect, don't we see that evidence in some of the Fed report that showed that people are expecting inflation, or no?
Well, we don't measure these things precisely, but we do measure them a lot, and there are many, many different measures. And broadly speaking, those measures are at levels that are consistent with our 2% inflation goal, not for the near term, but for the medium and longer term. But nonetheless, that's the right issue. I mean, we monitor that very carefully, and to the extent we were to see expectations broadly drifting up and the regime changing, we would certainly use our tools to make sure that inflation is consistent with our goal.
I appreciate you tracking this, because I believe as Americans are looking at the runaway spending here in Washington, D.C., without a long-term plan to pay for it, that these expectations of inflation will continue to increase. And as the expectation plays out, as you noted, I think we'll see real inflation in the future having a
ओके, तो यहाँ पे जैसे फिर से कंफ्यूजन चलती हुई दिख रही है। अभी तक हम लोग को इन्फ्लेशन घटने की बात आ रही थी और यहाँ पे एक्सपेक्ट फिर से किया जा रहा है कि इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ते हुए दिख सकते हैं। और गोल्ड का एक बार मूव वापस से देख लेते हैं, तो गोल्ड हमारा 1758 के लेवल्स पे आते हुए दिख रहे हैं। वापस से एक बार अपसाइड मूव लेते हुए 1759 के लेवल देख सकते हैं। जिस तरीके से स्पीक ने पूरी तरीके से मार्केट पे रिएक्ट किया है, अगर किसी ने अच्छे से स्पीक सुना होगा तो उसने पूरी तरीके से मार्केट को मूव किया है। हम लोग लाइव आप लोग को स्पीक इसलिए दिखाते हैं क्योंकि इस टाइम पे हम लोग देखते हैं कि सब लोग स्पीक की ओर जाते हैं और किसी और सेशन पे, किसी और मार्केट के डेटा पे ध्यान नहीं रहता है। बाय द वे, रहना भी नहीं चाहिए। इसीलिए हम लोग अपने प्लेटफॉर्म पे ही आपको सेम डेटा दिखा रहे हैं ताकि आप लोग का ध्यान कहीं और ना जाए। आप लोग हमारे प्लेटफॉर्म के थ्रू न्यूज़ भी देख सके, डेटाज भी एनालाइज कर सके, लाइव मार्केट भी देख सके और अभी जो स्पीक चलते हुए दिख रहे हैं वो भी देख सके।
a significant impact on the debt burden that the debt to GDP ratio holds. Recognizing the time, I yield back. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. The gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Adams, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Mute.
Please unmute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Yellen, Chairman Powell, thank you both for being here. I'd like to follow up on a question that Senator Brown posed to both of you on, I think, Tuesday. He raised an excellent point that no Black woman has ever served on the Fed's Board of Governors, and you both indicated that you want diverse viewpoints represented at the highest levels of our economic policy-making bodies. And last year, we had our own OMWI directors testify before us about their efforts to diversify your entities. But I'd like to hear directly from you both. What are you doing in your respective organizations to encourage appointment and hiring of Black and brown women at all levels of seniority? And have you considered recruiting on the campuses of HBCUs and other MSIs?
Well, I can start off and say that we have a very active program at all levels of the Treasury Department, including political appointments, at recruiting a diverse workforce and leadership. And I think if you look at the appointments that we've made or proposed, that we've made good on that commitment and continue to give it the highest priority. With respect to the Federal Reserve, I and others will provide advice on nominations to the president. Will be up to him to to nominate individuals to serve at the Fed board, and we certainly will ensure that he has a diverse slate of candidates to consider in making these appointments.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
We work very hard to recruit diverse talent, diverse people to the board, and we work very hard to keep and make sure that the people that we do succeed in recruiting have good opportunities, are included in opportunities to learn, and have as many opportunities as they can have so that they can have a career at the Fed. It's a very high profile focus for us.
Thank you. Secretary Yellen, it's always a pleasure to have you before us. In case you don't know, like you, I was a professor for over 40 years, and I tell folks all the time that I might not be in the classroom anymore, but I still enjoy educating those of us here in the Congress. And so if you don't mind, I'd appreciate it if you take us back to the classroom and help educate us a bit. So do you believe economic recovery is strong enough to handle the withdrawal of current pandemic relief efforts?
Well, I think the relief efforts have been very important in stimulating a strong recovery. And I mentioned in my opening remarks that we're outperforming, the United States is outperforming most other developed countries in the strength of our recovery due to those efforts that Congress has made. And there will be fiscal drag next year, namely, we had a good deal of impetus or stimulus this year, and it will diminish substantially next year. Nevertheless, most forecasters and the administration believe that the recovery will continue and that private spending will be.
सो देख सकते हैं गोल्ड का मूव 1758 से 1759 के लेवल्स पे वापस से एक बार थोड़ा सा अपसाइड मूव करते हुए दिख रहा है. सेवनटीन 1759 के लेवल्स पे हम लोग आ जाते हैं एक बार अपने डिस्कशन पॉइंट पे वापस से. तो हम लोग डिस्कस करने जा रहे हैं कुछ और चीज़ें. So what makes gold popular against commodity traders? So points to be discussed today. What makes gold popular? Gold's popularity amongst traders, gold's reaction to global currencies, how is gold traded on the market, popular ways to trade gold, trading gold CFDs, exposure through gold CFDs. So what makes gold popular? So gold has historically been referred to as a safe haven or store of value asset, which is a safe place for investors to store their cash during times of instability or uncertainty. Adhered for thousands of years, gold, a precious metal, has historically been used for industry, beauty, and most importantly, trade. Gold being and immediately recognized. This is true enough through today, where it powers trade amongst individual traders up to the world central bank. With gold being an internationally recognized commodity throughout history, it is no wonder that it has remained a popular commodity amongst traders until today. Gold popularity amongst traders. So, gold popularity can be traced far back to ancient Egypt and beyond. Rare coins and jewelry have contained this precious metal, praised for its beauty and proof of sophisticated trade systems. Up until the 1970s, the USD was on a system called the gold standard. This meant that each ounce of gold was given a USD value that was directly connected to the dollar. डिस्कस करेंगे गोल्ड्स अपॉर्चुनिटी अमंग्स ट्रेडर्स. इसके पहले एक बार MT4 टर्मिनल पे, क्योंकि हम लोग की 15 मिनट कैंडल की क्लोजिंग का टाइम है और दूसरी कैंडल ओपनिंग का टाइम. 1758-57 के लेवल्स। देख सकते हैं एक दूसरी कैंडल फॉर्मेशन 1757.75 के लेवल्स पे, थोड़ी सी स्टेबिलिटी के साथ 1758 तक के लेवल्स, 1757.94, 1757.85। मार्केट पूरी तरीके से स्टेबल होती हुई इस टाइम देखने को मिल रही है। 1 मिनट कैंडल का मूव देखते हैं तो 1 मिनट कैंडल पूरी तरीके से अपने मिड बैंड से लोअर बैंड के बीच में स्टेबल होती हुई, देख सकते हैं थोड़ी सी करेक्शन होती है 1757.29। अब थोड़ी सी करेक्शन और मार्केट थोड़ी सी अपने आप को डाउन साइड लेके आती हुई दिख रही है। सेवनटीन 56.8277 के लेवल्स पे प्राइजेस मूव करते हुए थोड़ी सी करेक्शन। सेवनटीन 56.66 एक शॉर्ट रेड कैंडल बनती है, देख सकते हैं लगातार मार्केट ने जितनी तेजी दिखाई, अब थोड़ी सी करेक्शन 1756.78 तक के लेवल्स बनाते हुए प्राइजेस फिलहाल मूव करते हुए दिख रहे हैं। सो हम लोग आ जाते हैं वापस से डिस्कशन पॉइंट पे। सो गोल्ड पॉपुलैरिटी अमंग्स ट्रेडर्स, सो दिस मीन फॉर द every dollar that was seen in circulation, the US Mint have to have stored gold in order to print it. If printing exceeded the amount of gold that was available, it would lead to inflation. This system was abandoned in 1973 to make way for the more modern system of banking and trading. At this point, gold began having its independent valuation dictated by supply and demand, not governmental agencies. Gold's relation to global currencies. So, gold is generally viewed as a store of value that has retained its worth over time, despite economic booms and bust. Larger economies like the US, UK, Eurozone, and China still hold large gold reserves, even though the commodity is not directly tied to the currency's value. In order for these currencies to retain their value, central banks use the purchasing of gold as a tool to show they have a physical asset to justify the valuation of their money. For countries experiencing high inflation, they may purchase gold to hold in their reserves. This may instill confidence in investors and traders, proving that they have the ability to stabilize their currency. While this is just one of many tools that central bank use to maintain a stable currency, traders recognize this yellow metal as providing greater legitimacy to a country's currency valuation. How gold is traded on the market? So gold is traded on Chicago Mercantile Exchange in USD and is measured in troy ounces. This Middle East era measurement translates 1 troy ounce into 31.1034786768 grams. The CME allows you to trade gold bullion futures contracts. Buying these directly from the CME may be accompanied by a commitment to purchasing, storing, and insuring the underlying asset should you own the contract as it expires. How is gold traded on the market? Alternatively, traders can buy or sell gold contract CFDs. CFD contracts can be opened against the metal's current spot price, allowing traders to gain exposure to this metal volatility and risk without buying the underlying asset. Popular ways to trade gold. Gold has been a highly sought after precious metal for thousands of years, regarded as a safe haven metal regardless of location, economic situation, or political instability. It has historically maintained value well over time. Popular ways to trade gold. Today, gold can be traded by buyers, sellers, miners, and speculators who may open positions against the price movement of the precious metal without owning the underlying asset. Each strategy comes with its own potential risk and potential rewards, so traders should pick the trading strategy that best suits them. Trading gold CFDs. So there are multiple ways to trade gold, including traditional markets and CFDs. Below are four popular ways of speculating on the price of gold on the plus 500 platform. Gold CFDs contracts for difference allows you to open a position without needing to purchase the underlying asset. Rather, a trader can open a position go long or short or an instrument speculating on the price movement and recognizing potential gains or losses depending on the real time movement of instruments spot price as traded over the counter. By trading based on their support spot price rather than on a future price, traders can recognize higher liquidity and availability. Option CFTs. So the benefits of option CFTs on gold is that you can pay less to open your position than if you choose to buy a gold CFT itself. This is because you are opening a CFT position against the option contract, not gold itself. This can offer a trader exposure to the instrument at a lower price. It's important to remember that higher volatility of option CFT can carry higher risk. Moreover, there are many other factors which can cause major fluctuation in the value of option CFD. Gold ETFs की बात करें An ETF closely follows the value of an underlying asset. CFD on a gold ETF such as GLD tracks the daily price of gold, allowing traders to buy and sell positions against the underlying ETF. Exposure through gold ETF, so trading CFDs on gold allows traders to become exposed to the volatility of this popular commodity without needing to purchase and maintain the underlying asset. It is also possible to go short on a commodity should a trader speculate that the price will drop. For example, traders who open a buy position speculate that the price of gold will rise. If they are right, they will make a profit on the price difference between the opening price and the higher closing price of their position. If, however, the closing price is lower, they will incur a loss that is equal to the difference between the opening and the closing rates. On the other hand, if a trader believes that the price of gold will fall, they can open a sell position, allowing them to profit off the opening price and lower closing price. On the same note, if the price rises from the opening price and the trader closes their position at the higher rate, the trader will incur a loss which will be the difference between the opening price and the higher closing price. सो हम लोग आ जाते हैं अपने MT4 टर्मिनल पे और देखते हैं गोल्ड का प्राइस क्या चलते हुए दिख रहा है। तो गोल्ड वापस से 56 के लेवल्स बनाते हुए 58 के लेवल्स पे आते हुए दिख रहा है। 1758.83 के लेवल्स पे मूव करते हुए फिलहाल। सेवनटीन 58.73 के लेवल्स बनते हुए प्राइजेस के 3 मिनट बाद इस कैंडल की क्लोजिंग का टाइम और हम लोग आ जाते हैं अपने डिस्कशन पॉइंट पे। एक बार अपने स्पीच को देख लेते हैं वापस से।
Sufficient to have us pass the baton to it and keep the economy growing. You know, we've proposed, we're in the middle of, as you know, with reconciliation, and the programs under consideration there are really spread out over 10 years, provide some modest stimulus in each of those years, but
Thank you, ma'am.
at a much
Okay.
lower level than the rescue plan are oriented towards structural
Okay.
issues in the U.S. economy.
Thank you. So now we know our mission here is to ensure that the economy continues to recover for all Americans. So if Congress fails to raise our statutory debt limit by mid-October, what would the effect be to the economy?
It will be devastating to the economy. We'll be unable to pay our bills for the first time in American history. It could provoke a financial crisis and a recession, and it will harm every American.
Thank you. You know, it's irresponsible, I believe, that my colleagues in both the House and Senate would risk our recovery from this pandemic for political points. So I'm glad that you hear I'm glad to hear that you agree, and I look forward to this body protecting all Americans by doing the right thing and raising this debt ceiling. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Timmons, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Secretary Yellen, Chair Powell, thank you for being here with us today. Just yesterday, Speaker Pelosi gave oxygen to the idea that President Biden has the ability to mint a $1 trillion commemorative coin made of platinum, deposit it in the Federal Reserve, and then use that to pay our bills. A number of other members have adamantly promoted this proposal to include Congressman Nadler. And just Tuesday, my colleague across the aisle tweeted hashtag mint the coin. Chair Powell, please tell me you think this idea is as ridiculous as it sounds.
I really, that's not a question for me.
I had a feeling you would say that. I just wanted to start there. Madam Secretary, please tell me that this is not a legitimate policy proposal and that this is not something that we're considering.
I believe that the only way to handle the debt ceiling is for Congress to raise it and show the world, the financial markets, and the public that we're a country that will pay our bills when we incur them.
I really appreciate that
platinum
response more than
coin-
you can possibly know. Thank you so much. That cuts some of the next few things I was going to say short. We are not going to mint a $1 trillion coin. We're not really, these are not serious policy proposals. Speaking of serious policy proposals, I want to talk about what Congressman Kustoff and Congressman Hollingsworth touched on, the idea of, well, I guess it's changed because as the Biden administration proposed it, it was originally all transaction histories of any account with more than $600 in or out of it. So you testified not 15 minutes ago that it now in reconciliation is not being considered. It is just the account balance. So
Sure.
it's changed.
I never said that the administration ever proposed collecting detailed transaction data from individuals. That is never anything that the Biden administration contemplated.
So you just said it's changed since the original proposal to what is now being considered. How did it change?
A few additional pieces of information were contemplated for businesses.
And those are no longer being, so it's getting better. It's moving in the right direction because I've had a number of banks and credit unions reach out to me. It's remarkable. Generally, they do not agree. They are in agreement that this is a terrible proposal. So I know that we're trying to figure out how to pay for $5 trillion of spending, but this is not, just as mint the coin is not a serious policy proposal, this is not a serious policy proposal.
This is a very serious policy proposal. We have a $7 trillion estimated tax gap that we have a great deal of tax avoidance by
देख सकते हैं बीबी स्पीच के दौरान प्राइजेस में मूव होते हुए दिख रहा है और प्राइजेस वापस से एक बार रिकवरी करते हुए 1758 के लेवल्स पे. $1758-59 के लेवल्स वापस से बनते हुए दिख रहे हैं. हम लोगों ने सारी चीजें डिस्कस कर ली और हम लोग देख रहे हैं कि स्पीच भी अभी तक चलते हुए दिख रहा है. और आ जाते हैं अपने स्पीच पे वापस से.
by individuals and businesses, typically very high net worth, high income individuals and businesses that have opaque sources of income that are not paying the taxes that are
Respectfully,
due.
what does that
And
have to do with
compliance-
$600 accounts? That's every single account of, what is it, 99% of Americans?
Well, listen, banks already report interest amounting to over $10 to the IRS on every account in the country. And this proposal involves two additional.
सो हम लोग एक बार डिस्कस कर लेते हैं गोल्ड न्यूज किटको को. So gold price jumps $40 as Fed Powell says the US is still far from full employment. The gold market rebounds from 6-week lows as Federal Reserve Chair testifies that the US is still far from full employment as all eyes were on the Fed's Chair Jerome Powell and US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. The duo testifies before the House Committee on Financial Services on their agencies response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Gold saw quick double-digit gains Thursday morning as bargain hunters stepped into buy and the dips in prices. and the US dollar index fell to daily lows after surging in the previous session. December COMEX coal futures were last trading at 1762.80, up 2.32%, or $40 on the day. The move higher in gold accelerated after Powell sounded slightly dovish when stating that the US is far away from the employment. According to Powell, this gives the Fed room to keep the rates low and keep accommodation in place. We have to balance inflation and employment. Our expectation is inflation will come down and we won't have to have the two goals in tension. At the September monetary policy meeting, Powell said the Fed could start to taper in November, which would last until the middle of next year. While grilled on the inflation, Powell also sounded unsure when the pressures would abate. We do think that inflation will remain elevated until supply bottlenecks are resolved. The debt ceiling was another heated topic in the discussion during the hearing. Allen once again warned that it would be a catastrophe if Congress failed to raise the debt ceiling. The US Treasury Secretary also described a worry picture if Congress waited until the last minute to raise the debt ceiling. As we saw in 2011 when the debt ceiling was raised at the absolute last minute, investor and consumer confidence shaken. What would happen this time around is an increase in the interest rate and sell off in stocks. Anyone who has a loan would see higher interest cost on their debt. The US government will run out of money on October 18, and if the debt limit is not raised, the US will default for the first time in the history. And an added credit of the US would be impaired, and our country will face financial crisis and economic recession. It's necessary to avoid a catastrophic event for the economy. Yellen also continued to urge Congress to work on a better repression basis. It's important this to be done on a bipartisan basis in recognition of the fact that the both Republican and Democratic have run budget deficit for the most of the post-war period for the only a few years, serving in an exception. And no hearing can end without questions. And about cryptocurrencies, Powell was asked to clarify his July comment, stating that one of the stronger arguments for a central bank digital currency is that it could replicate the role crypto plays. Here, Powell's full quote from July. I think that may be the case, and I think that's one of the arguments that are offered in the favor of digital currency. Powell said during a hearing before the US House of Representatives Financial Service Committee that in particular you would not need stable coins, you would not need cryptocurrencies if you had a digital US currency. I think that's the one of the stronger arguments in its favor. That's why cryptocurrencies again fall down, and Bitcoin also was down at that particular time when the Pearl said that statement. And this time around, Pearl clarifies that the Fed has no intention to ban cryptocurrencies. Okay, तो जैसे कि चाइना में हम लोग को क्रिप्टो करेंसीज पे बैन होते हुए देखने को मिला, और सबसे बड़ी हम लोग को मैन्युफैक्चरिंग देखने को मिलती है चाइना में, वही हम लोग को बंद होती हुई दिखी. बट अभी हम लोग देख रहे हैं यूएस में फेड चेयर जेरोम पवेल ने ऐसा कोई भी स्पीच नहीं दिया है कि क्रिप्टो करेंसीज बैन करने का. बट अगर ऐसा कोई स्टेटमेंट देते हैं अगर फेड चेयर जेरोम पवेल, तो हम लोग देख सकते हैं इंडिया में भी वापस से क्रिप्टो करेंसीज बैन होने के चांसेस देते हुए देख सकते हैं फाइनेंशियल ईयर 2022 में. सो हमारी साइड से आज के लिए इतना ही. हम लोग आज का सेशन यहीं पे एंड करेंगे. बाकी की चीज़ें कल डिस्कस करेंगे, देखेंगे गोल्ड का मूव नेक्स्ट कैसा रहा, कौन सी ट्रेड हम लोग ले सकते हैं और कैसे हम लोग को आगे के लिए मार्केट में ट्रेड करना है. सो थैंक यू सो मच फॉर जॉइनिंग एंड कंसंट्रेटिंग. आई एम एंडिंग दिस सेशन राइट हियर, right now. Thanks for joining.